You're like my public library, Vicky, because she like when she like researches the subject, she goes deep in and knows like is just like telling me so much stuff, and I'm like, oh my goodness. So she actually today, yesterday was the 76th anniversary of Auschwitz concentration camp, like memorial, um, and I actually read this article. A lot of Auschwitz survivors, celebrated that online because of the pandemic. So that's great. And Vicky and I were kind of talking, and I just was like, we should do an Instagram live about this because Vicky deeply researched. We all know, that the Holocaust, a lot of Jewish people were, you know, treated horribly. I mean, of course, beyond horribly, of course. But Vicky did a lot of research into another group of people that were tortured by the Holocaust, which is disabled people. And hi, Tylea. It's good to see you. I'm gonna, and Vicky, when we were kind of talking about how it came up, was we were talking about Madison Cawthorne, who is a disabled politician that just got
Who's a
elected,
Nazi?
who is a Nazi too, and he's actually from the state I live in, which is even more
Yikes.
horrifying for me. I live in North Carolina,
Yikes.
and so he got elected, and he identifies as a Nazi basically. And we were kind of talking like, if this was Nazi Germany, even though he's white, good-looking white guy that most people would be like, oh, good-looking white guy, let's keep him, let's keep him
Let's put
around.
him in power.
But
Yeah. No.
in the Holocaust Germany era, they'd be like, oh, but you're disabled, so you're useless. Go to the concentration
Yep.
camp, go into the experiments. So Vicky is here, and I'm gonna hand over the mic to her to talk about what she knows. And thank you so much, Vicky, for doing this with me. I appreciate
Yeah, absolutely. Me get to talk about the Holocaust and disability history. I am so down for that. So I feel like a trigger warning is obvious here. Like if you don't want to hear about genocide, maybe not watch this right now. But we do have to go back a little bit before the Nazis actually came to power to talk about the 1920 book by Karl Bindung and Alfred Hoche called Die Freigabe der Vernichtung Lebens und Werten Lebens, which is in English, it's the permission to destroy the life unworthy of life. That is the name of the book that basically talked about how it's totally legally okay to kill people who are unworthy of having life. So, like the disabled, if you don't have a value to society, you don't get to live. And the reason this book is so important is because this was a book that actually inspired the Nazis. This was something that they used to kind of start all of their horrifying policies and whatnot that kicked off in 1933 with both the law for the restoration of the professional civil service and the law for the prevention of progeny with hereditary diseases, better known as the sterilization law. So these were both passed in 1933. That professional civil service one was the one that kind of began the anti-Semitic law phase of the Third Reich. Um, but it did not start the like active abuse of the Jews yet. That came later. But that sterilization law authorized the sterilization of all persons with diseases considered hereditary. So basically, like any disability. I will say the Nazis really hated schizophrenic people. That was their like go-to. They also used a very, very vague definition of schizophrenia to actually like diagnose people. So it's not the schizophrenia that we know today to be schizophrenia.
it.
It's kind of any like
And
mental
any
illness.
kind of
Exactly.
mental difference, I guess we would call it.
Exactly.
Right.
And so that law ended up sterilizing. No one really knows how many, because like as great as the Nazis were at like keeping count of, how many Jews they did atrocious things to, they didn't really document disabled people as much. Don't know why, but there's not a whole lot of like confirmation on numbers, but it's estimated anywhere between 360,000 and 400,000 disabled people were forcibly sterilized from 1933 to 1939. These sterilization processes were actually, or policies were actually inspired by the US, who was doing, I believe, in like 20 states, they had forced sterilization laws as well from like the early 1900s to around the 1930s. Yeah, 1907 to 1939 was the US forced sterilizations, which inspired the disabled sterilizations by Nazis. And then 2 years later, they passed the marriage law of 1935, which required that all marriages prove that their offspring would not have any form of disability. So not only did the two people in the marriage have to prove that they were not disabled, they had to prove that, they had no family history of it, and if you did, like, you weren't allowed to conceive a child. They would sterilize you, and then eventually they would steal your baby. If, that you got, if you were already pregnant when it happened, they would either, like, abort the baby without your permission, or they would steal it to do horrible things to it later on. German Protestant churches were like, oh, this is totally chill. We're going to encourage and cooperate this. And Roman Catholic churches in Germany were like, this goes against our doctrine, but not necessarily our morals. So don't do it, but like, go ahead and do it. Yeah. It was really weird because all the articles that I found on this were like, they opposed it for doctrinal reasons. And then there's like a footnote that they're like, it wasn't moral reasons, it was doctrine. And I was like, oh, okay, that makes so much more sense.
Right.
Okay. Yeah. So then, as the Nazis continued rising to power in the 30s, they actually did a lot of propaganda posters and whatnot. There's a lot of different ones out there, all basically around the same thing of telling you how much money they would spend on disabled people per year versus what that money could do for other people. So there's one that said for 60,000 Reichsmarks is what a disabled person costs society per year or per their lifetime. And like citizens, hey, this is your money, like we could put it to better use and, fix the economic problems following the Treaty of Versailles. So they really, from like the early 30s up until 1935, they really, really focused on propaganda, trying to say that, it wasn't necessarily fully the Jews' fault that we're broke. It's really disabled people that are killing our economy. So like, let's get rid of them. Which is what Hitler started planning. And in 1935, he made a private statement saying that he really wanted to start a war because the war would be a cover so he could kill disabled people and help their economy. But because there's a war going on, like nobody would care. And he could just go about, killing disabled people for funsies with no one paying attention, no one caring, and no protests.
Right.
So in 1939, two things happened. So the first was that the Reich Minister of the Interior issued a decree compelling all physicians, nurses, and midwives to report newborns and toddlers who were showing signs of any mental or physical disability, which started the process for killing disabled children and adults. If you did birth a disabled baby, they would just kind of take it and tell you he died, like came out stillborn or something like that. And then they just go like murder the baby in the back, basically. And then shortly thereafter, Hitler authorized this program called Aktion T4, which the T4 is after Tiergartenstrasse 4, which is the location of like the building where this plan was hatched. Such a creative program name, just name it after the building you're in. But this was a program that authorized the medical administering program of mercy death, aka euthanasia, which would claim the lives of about 70,000 Austrian and German disabled people between 1940 and 1941. Originally, it only focused on those disabled people already institutionalized, so mostly that was just you're mentally ill. Some of your physically disabled people were in those institutions as well, but those with invisible illnesses could kind of skate by. If you didn't, if you didn't look disabled, you could kind of pass. But there was also a film that actually, I believe it's called Das Die Erbe or Das Erbe, I can't remember, but it's called The Inheritance in English. And basically, it's this film where the husband suspects his wife has like invisible disability, so he goes and reports her to the police, and they just come in and they're like, "Hey, you're disabled. Enjoy this camp. It's free," and just like put you on a boat and send you off. Yeah. So this is where shit gets. When I said there was entertaining things, this is one of those moments. So this Action T4 is a total top secret plan, right? Um, parents, when the Nazis would approach the parents about this, they would tell them that they were taking their kids and sending them off to this facility for improved care. Same with adults in nursing homes or any other sanatoria. And the families were, told, hey, this facility sucks. We're gonna send them to this like far away place and put them in that for better care. Which what actually was happening there was a bunch of mass murder. And the reason this got became public knowledge in 1941 is because Nazis are stupid. The high-ranking officials would talk about this at the bars. They'd be like having a beer, and they're like, "Oh yeah, we're like murdering disabled people in this castle," and it would like start spreading. When they would cremate the disabled people they killed, they would, put them in the urns and send them to the families with a death certificate and some, fictitious death reason like pneumonia or they drowned. And
Right.
the reasoning got a little weird. And at one point, they really fucked up. And in a dude's urn, they accidentally put a hairpin, like, from a girl.
Uh-huh.
And when the family opened it, they're like, hairpin? This is my son. What? So that repeatedly kept happening. So all of these like suspicious deaths made, they pressured the Nazis to kind of in revealing their plan, I guess. So Hitler canceled Aktion T4, but he really didn't. He just said they stopped and then they kept doing it, but like at this point, they had already started the war by, invading Poland a few times. So at this point, Hitler's plan of I'm gonna start a war so I can kill disabled people was already working. So once we were so focused on the war and the abuses of the Jews, he was able to still run his euthanasia program like completely fine. No one really cared about it anymore, so at a certain point, the Nazis realized that killing people was taking too long via the lethal injection or starvation, which is what they were using. So they decided concentration camps were the way to go here because, it was taking too long to, save the economy. So they organized 6 death camps around Germany. One was Brandenburg, Grafenberg, Gomadering in Baden-Württemberg, which is actually 2 hours south of where I lived. So that was fun. Bernberg, Sonnenstein, Hartheim, and Hadamar. And almost all of those had a odd significance to them. So the Brandenburg is where the first gas chambers started being experimented on by turning the shower rooms, into the gas chambers, changing out the nozzles, whole 9 yards. Hadamar was just weird because they were super happy with what they were doing there. And on the 10,000th cremation, they actually threw a party in celebration and gave beer to every single person who worked there. And were like celebrating and popping the champagne. Yeah. Great times, apparently. And then we have Hartheim, which is also where the Hartheim Statistiker came in, which basically was this like 39-page brochure with all of the Nazi secret plans in it. Again, Nazis are stupid, and they literally wrote their evil plan in this brochure, and then they left it to be found. Like,
I'll interrupt you for a second, Vicky, because I want to tell you that, because you said Nazis are stupid. So I think this is a friend of your lavishling said, Vicky Young, Nazis are stupid, 2021.
Thanks,
So,
Selena. That is gonna be my campaign slogan.
and Anya also agrees that Nazis are stupid. So yes.
Yeah.
Yes, they are. Obviously, Vicky has just told us how they are stupid. So
They just remind me of the Nazis really remind me of Dr. Doofenshmirtz, where they take like 6 minutes to reveal their evil plans,
right,
and in
right.
that time period, you're like, okay, I know how to beat you now, but like,
Yeah,
thanks
yeah.
for elaborating. Yeah. And then like all their plans blow up in their face, like leaving a 39-page brochure with your evil plan in it, where all the camps were, like what the purposes for them are. Yeah, it was a mess. But also in this was the calculation of how much money you could save
Right.
by killing 70,230 wait, hold on. 70,273 disabled people could save you 141,775,573 Reichsmarks, which, in case you're wondering what that conversion is, it's a butt ton of money.
Right.
Like, a lot of
Right,
money.
right, right.
Yeah. So at this point, in these 6 death camps, they were really experimenting what's the most quick way to murder a bunch of people. And they landed on, poison gas and mass murder via gunshot.
Right.
Like making them dig their own graves, all that fun stuff. And all of this was basically just like leading up to the Holocaust, specifically targeting the Jews at this point. But by this time, Germany had exterminated about 100% of the schizophrenic population of Germany at the time. There's estimates anywhere from between like 3/4 of the schizophrenic population to 100%. So by around the mid 1940s, there were no schizophrenic people to be found in Germany at all. So
Wow.
that's fun. Many of these death camps actually closed because they ran out of disabled people to march.
Interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, that was a fun one.
So just
So,
to sum up, I do want to tell people this is a disturbing subject. So if you're popping in, trigger warning about this is about the Holocaust. So it's
trigger
not
warning, genocide.
genocide. Um, and it's so far what to sum up, Vicky, it's interesting because we all, when we learn about the Holocaust, we learn about the anti-Semitism involved with it, but this I just learned this from Vicky, like it was actually kind of a plan to get rid of disabled people without getting too much pushback from society. So it was just not only was it stupid, it was pretty damn evil. So yeah, sorry, Jewish people, you got caught in the crossfire of trying to get rid of disabled people, and that's really sad and unfortunate. So
It kind of turned into one of those, like, there was a really weird document to read that they didn't really have the English translations for, but like I obviously like know German, so while I was reading it, there was a theory that like the reason that the Jews even got targeted was because like they knew they didn't have enough disabled people to like fully kill. And even when they first wrote their like plan about like, who the unworthy people would be to die,
mhm.
originally like Jews were not listed on there. It was literally just anybody with disability. There were 6 disabilities that they targeted specifically. So like your developmental disorders, any physical disabilities that required a full-time use of like any mobility aid, anything that made you ugly. I don't know what that means,
Yeah,
but that was part of it. I mean, we had that same law in the U.S., so
yeah,
except we
yeah.
murdered people for being ugly. That was just a Nazi thing. But yeah, like,
Killing was just the Nazi thing. The American way was just don't let them come out into our restaurants and in our public spaces. So,
Yeah, make it illegal for them to be out in public until like what the end of the 1970s, I
right,
think
right,
the last one expired, and the Nazis were just like, "Nah, you can come out in public, but like if we catch you, we'll put you in this camp."
right,
Like
right.
such a better policy. Um, oh, Anya just said her grandmother is a Holocaust survivor and she was named after my aunt who died in the Holocaust. This topic is super important. I
It
am
is.
sorry about
I'm
that,
so
Anya.
sorry about your your aunt, but it is super important. And I want to talk about why this is super important. Because we do learn from history, and so like when we look back at these dark moments in human history and how people like went along with something that was obviously so horrible, we need to like sit and reflect on that because we're living in this time right now. I'm not going to get into all the horrible things that have happened in the United States, but we all know. We don't really need to talk about the specifics. But yeah, so like it's important to talk about it because we don't want this kind of thing to be repeated. So then continue, Vicky.
And I feel like we don't talk about, and we don't talk enough about how Hitler arrived at, like, the concentration camp thing. Like, I
Yeah.
always thought he just woke up one day and was like, oh, this is totally a great idea. But,
Yeah,
like,
it's like I actually didn't know that either. I just was like, oh, they killed Jews and they had concentration camps and okay. And yeah, so it's kind of interesting to know that it was like people weren't getting killed quickly enough and it was about money and it was about people that weren't like everyone else. So, which kind of plays out today, not so much as killing, but not including and you know
yeah, absolutely.
thinking lesser of people that aren't quote unquote normal. So, you know.
Yeah. So now we're on phase three, which is after we've ended, after we, God no, after Hitler ended the euthanasia program. At this point, he ended it, as in, he just encouraged people to keep killing disabled people, but like, just don't be super loud about it. Like, if a baby comes out of the mom and you're like, oh, that has autism, you're just gonna like go in the back and, dispose of it and then lie to the mother about, where their kid went. That was still really going on through that. And then they also, so when they sent people to the concentration camps, as they were adding, they actually segregated the disabled people from the non-disabled prisoners that they were taking. So even in the concentration camps, it wasn't just, throw them all in one. You couldn't put disabled people with non-disabled people because it would make the non-disabled people less pure. Don't really know the logic because Nazis thought all the people in the concentration camps were unpure and, needed to be disposed of, but like somehow you were more pure still of the unpure if you were non-disabled than disabled. So
Right.
it sent the physicians who actually were the ones like running that Action Fear program to go to the concentration camps, go to the institutions, and do studies, observations of to find people who are unworthy of life. And by that, I mean they literally just went, no, 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 yes, no, no. There was no like full system or like plan. It was just kind of like, personal judgment, what
Right.
looked
Like,
like
this is what I
someone
feel
unworthy
like
of life.
today. These are the people I picked to kill today, basically.
Yeah, and
So yeah.
they when they did do intake of the people coming into the concentration camps, they did also like, do medical testing and whatnot to, see what they did catch, I guess. But yeah, that way they knew like, who's too old to work, who's gonna be prime work material because they weren't killing in the concentration camps at this time. Um, but this actually like continued of taking people out of institutions and the concentration camps to go kill them actually continued like after the last concentration camp was liberated by the US. So Like this continued, murdering disabled people continued in post-World War II Germany. They
Mm-hmm.
just stopped talking about it at that
Right.
point.
Right.
Yeah, so these camps and everything were, the Nazis like rehearsal for their later genocide. They actually also were training SS members who were going to be running the camps when they were mostly, focused on the Jews at that time. And at this point, we now change the definition of what the Nazis consider unfit to just anybody who is considered a biological enemy. Pick a definition for that because they really didn't have what constitutes a biological enemy.
Right.
So it was just kind of like at this point, like whoever they thought to kill. And they realized that they could actually like kill a crap ton of people and nobody would care. Like nobody was going to protest. No one was going to be upset about it. So while this was kind of starting to warp into the final solution part, there was also another program that emerged, 14F13, which continued that segregational period of, splitting the disabled from the non-disabled in the concentration camps and busing those disabled people to death camps. And they were, so four of those six camps that I originally mentioned closed completely. The other two, Bernburg and Hartheim, still operated as gas chambers just for disabled people. They had periods of time when they were empty, but they did keep them open and functioning, if you want to call genocide a function, like in there. And so, again, it's probably one of the weird, funny things because my brain picture makes this really funny to me. So, the Einsatzgruppen, you're gonna laugh when you hear this because it's ridiculous. It's like, picture this in a cartoon form. It makes it so much funnier. Okay, so the Einsatzgruppen, when they would enter other countries, they would literally take the mental ward patients and they actually built a specialized van that was a mobile gas chamber, like in van form, and
Oh
they
my
drove
God.
that around and would literally open the door, put people in, lock it like it's a U-Haul, hop in the vehicle, and drive down the road while their back of their truck was gassing people.
Holy moly.
Yeah,
That's
that's why I
great.
said it's less horrifying if you
If
picture
you
that as a cartoon. Like, but
Well,
yeah,
I was like thinking because I lived in LA and we got bed bugs and we were moving to the Bay Area and that's like what we just put all our stuff and put
yeah,
to kill the bed bugs. So I'm like kind of like thinking like, oh my gosh.
yeah.
But you did make my jaw drop there.
Yeah, that was when I saw that, I was like, I need pictures. So don't Google that if you don't want to be horrified. Because
Yeah, yeah,
they're kind of weird.
yeah. I can imagine.
Yeah,
I
and
can
like
only imagine because I haven't seen the pictures.
people who are being gassed to death aren't exactly silent either.
Right.
So you're like driving this mobile gas chamber. People are screaming in the back, and you just have to keep driving like, nothing is wrong. And
Right.
somehow no one stopped this. Uh, like it didn't raise red flags with so many people who would literally hear these trucks go by and hear like screaming in the back and then see the drivers just be like, "Oh, I'm just out for a Sunday drive. Let me just truck my way down the road as I have people suffocating in the back." And then they would just kind of deposit Selena, you can put a lot of people in the van. Just gonna throw that out there. They would like when it got full, they would either take them out, dig them graves, and like dump them all in the grave and cover it back up, or they would cremate them somewhere and then put the ashes back in the gas truck on wheels and just keep going. So then you would have people suffocating on top of other people's ashes. Great use of a truck.
Yeah. So I do want to warn everyone that's hopping on here. We are not talking about something pleasant. Yesterday was the 76th anniversary of Auschwitz. memorial. And so we are talking about the Holocaust and how the narrative for most people is how it killed a lot of Jewish people, which it did, of course, and my heart goes out to them, of course. But Vickey, just like from her research, was like the Holocaust was really started for a way to get rid of disabled people without any pushback from society, because people wouldn't be paying attention. So it is. I don't know what that is. That's so weird.
Uh, Future Girl 2073. I don't know if you were here when we talked about the 1920s book that basically talked about how when you're disabled, your life isn't worth living, so it's okay to kill you. That book was a huge influence on the Nazi policies. So
Right.
that's why no one gave a shit.
Yeah,
To
that book
be
was
honest.
titled in English. It translates life that's not worth
Yeah.
saving, or
Yep.
something like
Yep.
something in that
Yeah.
range.
Yeah. And that kind of like gets us out of the, final solution at this. By the time they're done putting people in mobile gas chamber vans, they're getting through the whole ending of the process. Liberation is happening. So now we're outside of that. People are still being killed in the institutions, but the war is over. Like World War II's ended at this point. And in the kind of aftermath, this got buried like really, really quickly. Partially because Future Girl, I would definitely not recommend reading that book. It is horrifyingly disgusting. I read parts of it last night, and I wanted to throw up. I also study counterterrorism. That doesn't make me want to vomit. Reading that book really made me want to vomit. I got like 3 pages in, and I was like, no. It, oh, it's sketchy. Really sketchy. But yeah, this got buried like super, super quick, partially because there were still killings going on, so they're trying not to, get those out there, but also the focus was more on, became more on, that the Jews had been almost eradicated from most of Europe, while also so had the entire schizophrenic population because they were still being killed the entire time, as we're invading more places. The Nazis are still, putting schizophrenic people to death like without a second thought.
Right.
So as we're kind of getting out, all of the death counts for disabled people have become mere estimates. No one actually really knows what that final count is. There are some estimates that are only around 250,000 deaths specifically, but there's a lot of experts who are looking back at the disabled history saying those counts really need to be revised upwards. And there's a lot of different reasons why it's difficult to like to fully count how many disabled people were killed, partially because like we didn't really document disability well to begin with at this time. Science obviously wasn't where it was at the time, but also the Nazis made it really, really, really hard to identify. And again, this is where you're going to want to picture this as a cartoon so it doesn't make you puke. But when they would kill someone, Nazis would actually like cut open their brains and then like split the brains and scatter them in different places. Some brainless bodies were found and some bodiless brains were found. It turns out where I studied university in Germany, they found a ton of brain parts buried in our city. And you can't really identify brain parts that much. If you
Right,
just
right,
have
right.
like a chunk of like the frontal cortex, you can't just be like, oh, that's Ted's. Oh, that's Steve's. And then
Yeah,
like go find their bodies.
I
So,
know. I don't think you can do DNA testing or anything like that from
and
that
like
either. That's so
even if you
crazy.
did, you would need to like have somebody else's DNA. Like you would
Right,
need to have
right.
a match
To
for
to
it. You
match it
can,
match it to
yeah. And even if you do match it, there's not a whole lot of like information that you can get out of that other than like, oh hey, this is Ted's brain, this is Ted's arm, and but you can't like learn anything about Ted from identifying that. So like you wouldn't know, was he a Roma, was he a Jew, was he disabled, was he all three? Like you wouldn't
Right,
know
right.
that.
Hmm.
So that was one of the many, many things that Nazis did to like make it really hard to like get a count because you would have no idea whose body parts you were, picking up after. And they didn't, like I said earlier, they didn't keep great records of disabled deaths. Again, that's anyone's guess as to why they chose not to be meticulous on that, but chose to be meticulous on everything else.
Well,
Um,
I kind of think like they didn't value those lives, right? So they didn't really care about keeping track of how many disabled people they killed. So they don't value the life, obviously, from the title of that book. And
which is
and
so funny
then
because like they didn't value the Jewish lives either, but
but
like they
apparently they
meticulously
valued
documented
it
it.
more than
Yeah.
disabled life. So Jewish life was actually more valued in this horrific event,
Yeah.
but it's a comparison to disabled life. So that's I'm horrible. Future girl, I agree. It is awful, but interesting at the same time. And so
And like kind of the aftermath of this really did push back the disability rights movement that did start. There was one that started in the end of the 1970s, but we didn't get full disability legislature until the early 2000s is when we got our equivalent of the ADA in Germany, and a lot
right.
of it
Okay.
was, undoing so much of the stigma that had carried over from the Third Reich, and also like they weren't really sure. I wonder if it was a pride thing, like look at how many Jewish people we killed. Yeah, Anya, it probably was, honestly, because they were super,
Yeah.
super proud of what they were doing. Like they literally, there's oh shoot, I'm forgetting the German for it, aka I shouldn't say it because like it's really a Nazi phrase that we don't say in German, but it literally translates to like race clean, and that's how they discussed it in press releases and speeches and whatnot, that the reason that they were doing this was to clean the Aryan race and whatnot. Yeah. And in the if you look at the memorials in Berlin, um, unlike all of the other monuments where they have, full documentation, they have all the victims' names on there. We do have a memorial for the Tafir victims, but no names are attached to that. It's
Hmm.
just kind of disabled people were killed. Have a nice day. And that memorial also came significantly later than all of the other monuments built for all of the other groups that were killed.
Okay, let me see. Some people are writing some stuff. Let me put on my darn glass.
Anya says, our future girl says, I'm surprised they documented Jews at all. Anya said, versus disabled lives, but they were like, let's just not have them in the stats map. And future girl said, I wondered about that too.
Yeah, it's the thing about I think the keeping record of the Jewish people, it was like a way for them to be like, look, this is the amount of Jewish people we killed.
Yep.
Look how well we're doing. Whereas disabled people were the people they really wanted to get rid of. They just they didn't want to be counted that to be accounted at all.
And I think when they document it, I know with the oh my god, I'm gonna blank on it. The Hartheim statistic, like
Mhm.
that was calculated in money. So I think that's how they chose to like document disabled deaths. It wasn't let's count the disabled people we've killed, it's let's count the money we've saved.
Yeah,
Because,
exactly.
we're saving a shit ton of money by like murdering these people. So like let's focus on that. Let's use that as a way to, tell our citizens that hey, we're doing a great job, we have all this extra money, but like don't talk about how we got it. Like,
Right, right.
yeah.
Yeah, interesting. And so, yeah, this is like, I always love talking to Vicky because I learned so much. Like, we all love Vicky for
Learn
that reason.
all
Besides,
those horrifying
she's a
things.
really awesome person. But besides that, she gives us so much knowledge. Um,
And nightmares.
and nightmares. We'll see what happens tonight when we go to bed. But so like I talked about how important it is for us to learn about this, because like how this conversation evolved was Vicky and I were talking about this politician who is disabled. He like me, he had a spinal cord injury, and he's a Nazi and a liar, and he's representing North Carolina, unfortunately, where I live. And you know, it's like kind of scary because we have this disabled guy who lives with internalized ableism, I do believe, because he makes up all these lies like, I'm in the Paralympics. Oh, I was about to be in the Navy, but I had a spinal cord injury, and it was all these lies. And so, and internal ableism does happen to people when right after they have a spinal cord injury, because this transition of living as a disabled person. But this person hasn't been disabled that long, and now he's been elected. He's 24. He's been elected. He had his injury when he was 18. He's been elected to the government, and I just feel I I just feel like we all need to keep an eye on him, because we don't really want him to push back the amount of rights as we have gained as disabled people so far.
If
And we
he
want
ever
more
discovers,
rights.
if
And we
he ever
actually want more
discovers
rights. So we
that,
don't want him to prevent us from getting more
but at
rights.
the same time, in order for him to push back against disabled laws, he has to learn how to write law and what a law is. Like, if you haven't seen the news story, and I shared it with Priya, but like, he literally admitted that he's more focused on communications and his overall messaging than he is about writing laws. He has no idea like what a law is. He literally got called out on CNN because he didn't know North Carolina's like laws at all related to voting or whatnot. And he was just like, yeah, I just don't know them. And it's like, you're a legislator, like you should
Yeah,
know laws.
it was interesting because in that interview he was like all obsessed with what was going on with the votes in Wisconsin, and the reporter's like, there was a lot of things going on in North Carolina. So do you think the Democratic governor, the party that all the Republicans are going to be pissed off at you about now, because you just said the Democratic governor and the Democratic election board did a great job in
Yeah.
making sure the votes were correct. And he even said, he's like, I think it's like a uh, example everybody should follow in the entire country. So
Right.
yeah, it's like, so I tell Vicky this all the time, and I tell my partner this all the time. I was like, just because you're disabled doesn't mean you can't be an asshole. There are disabled assholes, like there are disabled great people like me and Vicky. We're awesome. But there's also assholes that are disabled. So don't think because someone's disabled they have your best interest in mind, because that's just not true. Just because someone has a disability doesn't necessarily mean they're not a Nazi.
Yo, he's like, so I I can't. Madison's one of those politicians like I can't stop following just because I want to see what comes out of his mouth because like it's so ridiculous some of the things he says. Like Priya and I were talking about how he literally admitted that like he's like, oh, like I can put weapons in my wheelchair and go into Congress, even though like weapons are you can't have a gun in on the Congress floor. But like he literally admitted that to like while the Capitol is being invaded. He's literally talking about that on a talk show. And I was just like, you're literally sitting there. People are trying to get in to kill you. And you're calling in to be like, oh, I got weapons in my wheelchair. Like,
Which is
what?
a lie. He lied, because it's like, I, I don't know. That's like the ableism that is existing, like because people don't really know. If you don't use a wheelchair, you don't really even know what that means. It's like, where are you hiding the wheelchair? In your backpack, hanging
Like
off the back of your
I
wheelchair?
I
Like,
feel like you can, but like it's so hard because I'm thinking of like, you know, not just a handgun. Like I'm thinking of like, a full-on like assault rifle.
right, right, right,
Where are you hiding that? That's not, you're not gonna be able to fit it like make it like fit in your like your like armrests or
right,
something. Like
right.
it's not
Or
like
like, or
just
if
like
you just have it behind you, sitting behind you, you're just walking
yeah,
up
like it's
again.
not gonna be like one of those tank things where it sticks up and like hangs
Yeah.
over. Like I could like a handgun or a knife or pepper spray. That's all easily concealable, but like I don't know how that's gonna work because those are all illegal on Congress floor. The,
Exactly.
the amount of like delusion that is up here for him just
And
it
and the
baffles
thing
me.
is, it's like I have traveled. Like Kim, I have a spinal cord injury. I don't know how much ability he has compared to me, but um, I travel a lot with a wheelchair, and so people that just don't know, they're like, yeah, he's bringing in guns with his wheelchair. All right, good thing he's in a
Right.
wheelchair. Like, that type of thing. Like, where I've gone through TSA and I can't go through the metal detector. But
Yeah.
when I go, they put me down. Sometimes they'll be like, "Can you take your shoes off?" And
Yeah.
sometimes when I'm in
Yeah.
sometimes when I'm in pain and stuff, I'm like, "No, I can't. I can't. I'm disabled. I can't take my shoes off. You
Yeah.
guys figure out how you want to do it." And then they take these swabs to see if I don't know, there's like explosive material that they have some analyzer. And so they do all kinds of things. They
Yeah.
take wands, they pat you down. They're like, I'm about to put my hand here to see if you have any kind of weapon or anything. So yeah, for people that don't know, you can actually see if someone in a wheelchair is carrying a gun into a place. It's not undoable. It's not like an impossible thing to. So yeah, so it's just
Yeah. And
it's
Anya,
just
so that's your thing. Like, he does get away with a lot because he's disabled. Like, so when he was campaigning, one of the things that came out, a lot of women spoke out against him, saying he's a rapist because he is. And his campaign manager was like, he has a spinal cord injury. He's a paraplegic. He could never. Like, and I'm like, okay, he's still a rapist. So good job. Like he gets away with so much. And I think part of it is because, people are so quick to see the disability and be like, "Oh, well, he's in a wheelchair." Like we're not going to judge him because, whatever he says is, maybe it's part of his disability because, apparently being a Nazi is a disability. It's not, but people see it as it, or, if you're Ted Cruz, you think Tourette's is just screaming the N-word.
right,
Um,
right.
yeah, so like I think we do excuse a lot when people are disabled because the notion is we don't want to see disabled people as inherently bad, and so we let them get away with a lot of bigoted stuff. We literally let Madison get away with so much, and I'm glad people are speaking up and actually, calling him out for being the Nazi that he is. But
Yeah,
also, he's a
definitely.
terrible Nazi. If you saw his post when he visited Hitler's like house thing, his like beach house or what vacation house, I think. When Madison wrote the caption out, he spelled Führer wrong, and literally just you would know how to spell Führer if you're a Nazi. Just saying. I mean, you also know how to spell it if you're German, but like Nazis really know how to spell their leaders' names.
Right,
So
right.
he's a bad Nazi. He also did an interview when he
He's
was
a
being
bad,
called.
he fails at being a Nazi.
He's a really bad Nazi. Like, when he was being accused the first time of being a Nazi sympathizer, he literally went on record and was like, "Well, if I was alive during the Holocaust, I would have been killed." And I was just like, "Well, I'm glad you recognize that, but like, you're still a Nazi and you're a terrible one. Like, you would never Like, you would never have been allowed to be a Nazi in the first place. So, like,
Yeah, because he's disabled. He would have been one of the people they got rid of right at the
like
beginning.
he would have been one of the first in literally like in 1933. He would have been sterilized straight off the bat,
Right,
which
right.
great idea. But then like 2 years later, they would have just been like, okay, go to this camp, and maybe he would have been that 10,000th that they cracked the champagne for. Who knows? But like he wouldn't have survived. He wouldn't have been allowed to like be a Nazi unless he happened to be, not disabled when they came into power. But like the minute he got that spinal cord injury, they would have kicked him out and burned him alive.
Right,
Like
right.
it's just it baffles my mind that he's so obsessed with this group of people that would have hated him. I mean, they probably would have hated him for his political beliefs too, but like they literally would not have let him in. He's like so wrapped up in this like
Yeah.
fantasy that he would have been allowed to be one of them. But I'm like, it's just it blows my mind. Like seeing him go through the like mental gymnastics that he has to go through to be like, oh yeah, I'm a Nazi, even though they hate me and would have killed me, but I'm still a Nazi, it's fine. And I'm like, yeah.
So yeah, thanks so much, Vicky, for having this conversation.
Absolutely.
Keep an eye out on Madison. I mean, he's not the only person in Congress, so obviously, I'm sure there's going to be plenty of people, keeping an eye on that. But we all need to speak out, especially the disabled community, because like I say, disabled people can be all kinds of people.
Yep.
And if they have bad beliefs, you need to call them out. It doesn't matter if they're disabled. So
Yeah.
let's do that, people. And thanks,
Keep an eye on
everybody.
your rights, because they might go poof if
Yeah,
Madison discovers what law is.
yeah, and we all have to watch out for our rights. We don't want, we don't want to
If you
be.
want a good disabled senator, follow Senator Duckworth.
Tammy Duckworth is also disabled,
Yeah,
and she
follow her. Yeah, her. Yeah.
she she's a woman of color. She's Asian, and
She
she's
cares
an
about
amazing
disabled
speaker.
rights.
And she's very smart.
Yeah.
She's not a Nazi.
She's not a Nazi who's going to strip disabled people of all their rights when she discovers
Yes,
what law is.
exactly. So Tammy Duckworth, thumbs up. Madison Cawthorne, down, thumbs down. And so yeah, keep an eye on those people. And yeah, watch out for your rights. And I'm gonna sign off now. And thanks for Vicky is our personal she's not our public library, she's our private library, but we're so happy to have her as our friend and our informant. Thank you so much, Vicky. So I'm gonna end this Instagram live, and thanks everyone, Anya and Future Girl, and I couldn't read all the names. I'm sorry.
Selena and Marie were on here.
Yeah, thanks so much. I love you too, and thank you so much for joining us. It was.
Wait.
Oh wait. Yay,
Marie
Vicky!
commented.
Yay, Vicky! Woo,
I saw the comments that came in because they just showed up. Marie said his wiki page reads like an asshole manual.
Oh yeah, I saw that.
It does.
Yeah, because disabled people can be assholes. So go read that wiki page and find out what an asshole he really is.
We should retrace his campaign website so when you just type in asshole in Google Images, it should just pop his face up right there. Like,
maybe we should just make a meme of him. Asshole. Asshole. It won't be as popular as the Bernie Sanders meme, but
But like, can we profit off of it and then donate it all to disabled people?
That would be so great. So yeah, this is it. Okay, everyone, on here right now, make memes of Madison Cawthorne. Just say he's an asshole, and any money we make from it, we will donate it to a disabled cause of some sort. So
yeah, great. So,
thanks for joining us, everyone. I really appreciate it. And thank you, Vicky, so much. That was, oh my God, I learned so much, and I really appreciate that. So have a good night, everyone. Have a good night.
Bye.
I hope we didn't give anyone nightmares, and have a good night. Bye.
Bye.